the dawn of the new millennium, the online world was growing rapidly. The intellect of man and the advancements of technology combined had bestowed upon the world the creation of the Internet by Al Gore. News of a new Star Wars movie was spreading, the storyboard for The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring had been completed, nerd culture was about to reach critical mass, and Bill Clinton did not have sexual relations with that woman. And so entered the massively multiplayer online role-playing game, or MMORPG for short. The creation of the first MMO can be traced all the way back to the 70s, depending on your definition and standards, as they would be text-based. Though they had existed for decades, it was only near the new millennia that they would attract a sizable player base. Although varying in implementation, they all shared the central idea of an online, persistent world to be shared with players from all over the globe. A genre unique in the sense that there is no planned end, no credits rolled nor thanks for playing. Game content would be added as long as there are players playing, and the journey would only end when the player decided that it was over, a concept that was remarkably foreign to many at the time. In these early years, many would try their hand in breaking through the genre, and overall, it would contain a niche audience. Some were beginning to make a name for themselves though, such as Origin Systems' leap into the online persistent world with Ultima Online, an isometric fantasy game memorable for its PvP combat in particular. Mythic Entertainment, who would later develop Warhammer Online, took their shot with the Dark Age of Camelot, a third-person take on Arthurian lore mixed with Norse mythology and high fantasy. Star Wars would make their debut into the world of MMOs with the 2003 release, The Star Wars Galaxies, an MMO with a more heavy focus on community and sandbox gameplay. And most prolific at the time was EverQuest in 1999 by Variant Interactive and 99 Studios, decrowned the previously reigning champion, Ultima Online. Just 24 hours after launch, it would quickly become the most subscribed MMORPG at 10,000 subscribers. Yeah, really. 10,000 was the most subscribed MMORPG at the time. It would eventually peak at over 500,000 years after its launch, but as history has shown, this would yet be a fraction of the potential that was hidden within the genre, a potential that had yet to be realized. The MMO was on the rise, and the time to strike was nigh, and in the background, a beast was stirring, silently observing the strengths, the weaknesses, the successes, and the failures of the then relatively unexplored genre. Blizzard at this point already had established themselves as innovators with their Diablo, StarCraft, and Warcraft series, the latter being a real-time strategy game set in a fantasy world of orcs, elves, magic, and adventure, and having seen the success of other fantasy-based games such as EverQuest, the table was set. After halting development on an abandoned project, a small team of developers were left in limbo and were searching for inspiration on their next game. They had the IP, they had the funding, and most importantly, the timing. September 2nd, 2001. Long before Blizzard was big enough to hold their own convention, they held a panel at London's European Computer Trade Show, and it was then that the public for the first time saw the world of Warcraft. They made it clear. This was not the sequel to the popular RTS series at the time, but rather something completely different. Players would transition from controlling pre-made heroes and progressing through a campaign to creating their own heroes and making their own stories. The game would be multiplayer on a massive scale, bringing together fans of not only the Warcraft series, but of MMOs as a whole. The reaction, however, was mixed. Some waited with eager anticipation, trying to imagine their beloved series making its leap into the massively multiplayer setting, and many were upset at the abrupt change of focus, preferring Blizzard to concentrate on what was proven to work, instead of taking a gamble into unfettered territory. The idea of paying a monthly fee to continue playing was a hard pill to swallow at the time, especially by Blizzard fans who had grown accustomed to the one-time purchase models set standard by the company. Work would continue on the project, however, and the very first interview would be claimed by the Computer Gaming World magazine. By this time, EverQuest was the clear reigning champion, but the genre as a whole had one fatal flaw. That's the learning curve. Key loss, gear loss, and even permanent character death were commonplace in nearly every game of the genre, and combined with the large time investment in playing, it cultivated a very niche and hardcore community, and the everyday casual player would quickly succumb to the intense difficulty and seek entertainment from other, more forgiving games. It was a genre with a focus on character progression, with death penalties centering around character regression and a steep learning curve to go along with it. However, this transitionary period would prove to be a key moment where players for the first time would leave single-player games that looked like this into this online sprawling world. They were incomparable to each other, and although it's funny to think now, it was an intimidating thing. The time investment was, and still is, incredibly high. You had to have a computer, you had to have a good enough graphics card to run it, you had to have internet, and you had to pay a subscription. The amount of hurdles standing between the average person and the game were already high, and combined with the unforgiving gameplay of the landmark titles representing the genre, it was just too much for the average person. But it was this person, this untapped market of new and casual players that Blizzard would set their sights on. World of Warcraft took a completely different style of approach. During a time when XP loss was the bare minimum penalty for dying, World of Warcraft made you simply run back to your corpse.
One of the great things here is that when you die, and death is an inevitability in all these games, it's really not that big of a deal. All other online RPGs make death a really bad thing because dying should be bad, right? Well, in World of Warcraft, pretty much all that happens is you sit out for a bit. You respawn back in a graveyard and you run and get your corpse and you respawn. You don't lose experience points, you don't lose your items or any of that stuff.
When hitting the max level took years in other games, World of Warcraft it took months for most players. And when systems were complicated and confusing, requiring external literature to understand, World of Warcraft systems were relatively straightforward, and when character stat and template choices were often permanent, World of Warcraft featured costly but reversible methods of character progression and customization. In other games, you had areas designed for large groups of high-level players, referred to as raids, but they were commonly out in the open world, which resulted in having to compete against one another for kill credit. Due to this, there was a greater sense of urgency to complete the raid in its entirety in one sitting before any other guild had the chance to catch up and bring unwanted competition. Marathon sessions of guilds setting up 24-hour shifts was the common strategy to maintain dominion of these raids, in many cases to the detriment of the health of the players. This Final Fantasy XI boss was engaged for 18 hours until players were forced to quit after they began to faint and vomit. Though this boss in particular was nerfed shortly after the incident, this was the state of the endgame for most MMOs in these early stages. However, World of Warcraft had been one of the first MMOs to standardize instanced raids, where players and guilds could create their own unique raid instances, resetting on a weekly basis. And as for the raid bosses themselves, although today seen as archaic and simplistic, at the time they were quite advanced. In a genre where raid bosses boiled down to having a unique name with a higher health pool and increased damage, World of Warcraft would add unique, and often at the time, complex mechanics that required teamwork and thought to overcome, which in turn would become one of the game's major selling points. The worlds had NPCs, but were commonly static, whereas the world of Azeroth felt more alive with dynamic NPCs going about their daily lives. Simply put, what it didn't invent, it improved. MMOs were in a constant state of almost theirs. World of Warcraft was the first one to bridge that gap and bring it into a more mainstream audience, and it reaped the rewards because of that. The game would continue development throughout the years, with teasers being released in the form of magazine interviews and trailers, keeping the curious onlooker abreast on its direction. And after a long alpha and beta testing period, the moment of truth came on November 23rd, 2004. strategy of appealing to the casual gamer worked well. A little too well. Blizzard in no way was prepared for the frenzy of players eager to get into the world. Disconnects, lag, and rollbacks would persist heavily for the opening months, and still consistently through the next couple of years. Forums daily would be filled with outrage, demands for a refund, and even threats of lawsuits. The miraculous thing about it, though, is that it didn't even seem to slow its growth. The launch today is looked at as disastrous, and yet still, people came back again and again. How can a game that's playable maybe 50% of the time hold such a demand? Well, it's because it was that good. Years of development had paid off, as World of Warcraft quickly became a hit, almost immediately dwarfing all competition at the time and robbing them of their player bases. It was the vampire of the MMO industry at its release, and it would suck the life force out of every single previously mentioned staple of the genre.
But there was one unfortunate thing. The unfortunate thing was it launched right when WoW launched. So WoW brought the whole industry down, not just us. Every online game out there went down as soon as WoW went out. WoW was like a huge succubus of players went over there and drove into WoW. And it drove all our numbers down.
60 levels of progression and a world of challenges awaited the eager player base, and there would be many landmark moments just waiting to be claimed. Players rushed to the max level, and the title of the world first level 60 went to a player named Zenith, a troll rogue on the Stormreaver server on December 3rd, 2004, a little less than 2 weeks after release. By today's standards, incredibly slow, but back then, a no-life nerd, as onlookers weren't shy of expressing. On January 30th, 2005, the game would see its first raid cleared with the death of Anixia, taken down by the Guild Ruined on the Proudmoore server, and many players for the first time got to see the famed epic quality items that she hoarded. Blizzard would spend the following years perfecting their craft. As their subscriber base increased, so too did their budget, and more servers would quickly be added to support the booming player base. New patches would not only release new raid tiers, but also systems, items, and much more. And in May of the same year, the subscriber base would see its biggest surge for the next decade.
Okay guys, these eggs have given us a lot of trouble in the past. Does anybody need anything off this guy, or can we...
One of the earliest videos to go viral in the World of Warcraft was created by the guild Pals for Life. The guild was strategizing on how to clear out a particularly tricky room in the upper Blackrock Spire raid.
I think it's a pretty good plan. We should have pulled off this time. What do you think, Abdul? Can you give me a number crunch real quick?
Yeah, give me a sec. I'm coming up with 32.33, repeating of course, percentage of survival.
Oh, that's a lot better than we usually do.
Alright, chums up.
Ready, guys?
Let's do this. Zero Dragon!
Oh my god, he just ran in. Save him!
Oh geez, stick it clean!
Oh Jesus, let's go, let's go. Stick to the plan.
And in the midst of the conversation, a group member, Leroy, charges in prematurely with reckless abandon, causing the death of the entire group.
I can't move, am I lagging guys? I can't move! What the hell? I can't aim! Oh my god. The eggs keep spawning! More respawning! I don't think you can cast with that shit. Oh my god. Help!
We got it.
I got it. Pick it up!
Come on, stay down.
Oh my god.
God damn it, Leroy!
The video was later revealed to be staged, but nonetheless, it caught on like wildfire, and it was shared across multiple websites and forums, making it one of the first videos for World of Warcraft to gain viral popularity. Onlookers were intrigued. Word of mouth proved to be a prolific advertising vehicle for the game. It's hard to say today just how many people watched the video, as some of the uploads have been lost. The original upload on Warcraft Movies today sits at nearly 19 million views, and the original YouTube mirror reached at least 46 million before it was taken down. And surviving mirrors today sit at a total combined count of around 24 million. Regardless, it's by far the most viewed Warcraft-related video, even to this day, over 15 years later. It was so popular, in fact, that it was later featured as a question in the trivia show Jeopardy! Just a few months later in November.
This role-playing game, out in 2004, returns to the world of Azeroth, where heroes like Leroy Jenkins do battle. And that would be the world of Warcraft.
Pathetic. The Leroy craze wasn't the only phenomenon to spawn from the game, though. September of 2005 saw the release of the Zul'Gurub raid, the final encounter of which was a boss named Hakar. He had an ability called Corrupted Blood, which dealt some damage to a player, and if they were to stand too close to another, it would spread to that person. In a contained environment, it's just another raid mechanic. That is, until one player, intentionally or otherwise, managed to create a virtual pandemic that spread across every single server. The mechanic had one fatal flaw. By getting a pet companion afflicted with the disease and then dismissing it, it would persist when the pet is summoned once more. This person did just that, but in a crowded area, and spread the affliction to every nearby player and NPC, and as long as there were living hosts, there was no escape. Entire cities became infected by the plague. Word quickly spread, and other players intentionally started spreading the disease. Ironforge, Stormwind, Orgrimmar, every major capital city was a death hub, and was uninhabitable by lower-level players. The spread would continue to go on for days, until Blizzard eventually hotfixed the disease, but the resulting chaos remains to this day to be one of the most memorable moments in the game's history, and has even been used in real-world research of the spread and reaction of contagious diseases. Though there are many memorable landmark moments in the game's history, some are more controversial than others. In 2006, on the Elven server, a player by the name of Phajin passed away suddenly from a stroke, and in memoriam of one of her favorite activities, fishing, her guild had decided to host an in-game funeral service to pay one final tribute to her. There were two problems, though. It was publicly advertised on the Realm forums, and Illidan was a PvP server, where players of the opposite faction could freely attack one another. A guild, Serenity Now, saw the thread, and they felt that they would join in to pay tribute, but in a very different way. Having snuck through a nearby tunnel leading into the zone, an entire raid team prepared to crash the funeral. As players lined up to pay tribute to their friend, the raid quickly closed in on the location, and to make matters worse, in an effort to roleplay, many of the attendees had unequipped their armor and weapons, leaving them defenseless against the surprise onslaught. The funeral was quickly and easily dispatched. Serenity Now would become infamous on their server, and the crash still stands today as one of the most controversial in-game events in its entire history. All of these moments serve a crucial role in the telling of the history of the game, and they would serve as a reminder of the reasons why it became such a success. It's due not only to its own merits, but perhaps even more drastically by the community that the world of Azeroth was comprised of. This world, however, was about to change.
How many of you have played World of Warcraft?
Due to the success of World of Warcraft, Blizzard for the first time held their own event, a convention centered solely around Blizzard games named BlizzCon. This was, and remains to be, a unique aspect of the developer to hold a personalized convention tailored to their products, a form of celebration of not only the games that they're creating, but also the already massive community that they've built. The strong focus on the community would be something that Blizzard would become known for, and it created a loyalty of sorts from the players. It felt like it was more than a game. It was a community of people sharing their combined love and passion for the worlds that they created.
You guys take care of us, man. You guys really take care of us.
Diablo, StarCraft, Warcraft, fans from around the world would plan vacations around it. Longtime friends and guildmates would meet each other in person for the first time, and BlizzCon as a whole would become a very crucial part of Blizzard's identity from this point forward. And in the very first convention, held in October of 2005, a bombshell announcement was unveiled. The World of Warcraft is about to get bigger with the release of its first expansion, the Burning Crusade. The expansion boasted what players had come to expect from the World of Warcraft and more. They would step into the world of the Outland and progress through 10 more character levels, new zones, talents, dungeons, spells, raids, races, a profession, a new PvP system, and much more. It would add on to and improve in just about every aspect of the game. But it's still 2005, and there's a lot of game left to conquer before players began worrying about their foray into the Outland. There were dragons to kill and DKP to acquire.
Odd groups go to left, even groups go to right. That means 1, 3, 5, 7 left, 2, 4, 6, 8 right.
In the game, you had casual, hardcore, and everything in between. And there were some who took it even further beyond.
No reason to lose the main tank, and I am blaming you, because I blame myself. I can fucking do it. Everyone can do it. Do it right. This is bullshit.
Videos of a more serious or angry nature would start to spring up at this point. Those of raid leaders chewing out members for failing and properly performing the mechanics of a boss fight.
Well,
Crush him was fair and fair.
Who the fuck was that? Crush him! What the fuck? Whelps! Left side! Even side! Many whelps! Now handle it! Fuck!
The most prolific of which being Dives, the raid leader of the guild, Wipe Club. Anixia at this point had been slain by numerous guilds, and after some unsuccessful attempts, one of the members decided to record what would later become one of the biggest meltdowns in history, the Anixia wipe animation.
That's a fucking 50 DKP minus! What the fuck was that shit?
Much like Leroy, the animation would quickly become popular, and it highlighted the frustrating side of coordinating 40 people, including the challenging raids.
Don't play like you're just fucking going through the motions. You'll get your goddamn loot eventually. God damn it! Fucking bullshit!
Yeah, I know. Well, we're all gonna get attacked because we have no warlock here. Nice job, you fucking idiot!
hey, shut the fuck up! You stupid fuck! Stop!
These videos would paint players in a much less flattering light, as many people would become so obsessed that they would shirk real-life responsibilities and fall out of contact with friends, quit work or school, and in most extreme cases cause harm to themselves or others. In Korea of June of 2005, the 4-month-old child of a couple would suffocate when left unsupervised for several hours as the parents were playing World of Warcraft in an internet cafe. The phrase World of Warcrack was coined, shedding light on the dark side of video game addiction, particularly that of MMOs and the consequences of obsession, something that the media was not shy of reporting, as World of Warcraft, due to its popularity, would find itself at the center of this war against video game addiction.
Computer games, he's playing them an incredible 16 hours a day. His mother says his personality has changed and that he's become moody and violent, and his addiction is tearing the family apart.
To many, it was more than a game. It was a virtual life with the graphical interface. It attracted people from all walks of life and blended them together in the chaos of this online world. News of the Burning Crusade remained to be scarce, as it was still under NDA and the Friends and Family Alpha. A blog post teasing new features would be shared scarcely, but otherwise, it was still largely a mystery outside of what was shared at the 2005 BlizzCon. The excitement was palpable, and players from all over the world couldn't wait to get into the Outland. The beta test for the expansion started not too long after, as players got to discover and explore its features, and shortly after, World of Warcraft would become the focus of the cartoon series South Park. with their Make Love Not Warcraft episode. The episode detailed the boys' fight against the hacker antagonist and their struggle with video game addiction.
Oh, that's a big boy, isn't he?
Though on release, it was an instant success. Many years later, series co-creator Trey Parker detailed his worries with the episode, revealing that he even tried to get it pulled as he feared that it simply wasn't funny. But as history has shown, the episode would become an instant success, and despite the fact that the series at this point now has over 300 episodes, it remains to be one of their most popular to this day.
Looks like you're about to get pwned.
January 16th finally came, and it marked the beginning of a new era, the official end of vanilla World of Warcraft. People lined up outside of stores and tents in the freezing cold, launch parties were held, and the community was stronger than ever and pulled together with their one shared trait, their fear of women, their collective love for the game. At this point, it had amassed roughly 8 million subscribers by the expansion's release, never once reporting a loss, and holding on to the lion's share of the market. In the background stirred some serious competition, however. Mythic Entertainment, who developed the Dark Age of Camelot, sought to compete against Blizzard with an MMORPG adaptation of the renowned Warhammer series, due to its similar fantasy setting, holding orcs, magic, elves, and wizards. Many thought it to be the direct competitor to World of Warcraft, and deemed it to be one of the first of many would-be WoW killers during the time. Another such game was The Age of Conan, Hyperborean Adventures, developed by Funcom, who is mostly known in the MMO community for Anarchy Online in 2001. Its selling points would be impeccable graphics at the time, and a new and fresh combat system in a dark and visceral world, featuring the fatality mechanic, where players could execute each other in brutal fashion, often described as the Mortal Kombat of MMORPGs. And The Lord of the Rings Online by Turbine was also in development, an MMO of one of the most celebrated franchises in nerd culture history, certainly posed as a serious threat to Blizzard at the time. Though these contenders would be far off from release, the competition was beginning to get fierce, and to stave them off, the Burning Crusade had to be as exceptional as its predecessor. Months and months of doomsaying was put to the test. Did the Burning Crusade kill the World of Warcraft? Of course, the answer is no. The expansion was a major success, and the subscription base rose even more rapidly as players explored the dangerous reaches of the Outland. The classes evolved, and the gap between them was lessened, while still retaining the features that made them special. The raids were more challenging, the bosses more complex, and offering more to conquer to the ever-growing subscriber base. And the raiding scene itself proved to be even more difficult for players than what they had encountered in the base game, with many lists today naming a plethora of Burning Crusade bosses as the hardest in the game's history, even over 14 years later, with some of them going unkilled by 99% of the player base until Blizzard intervened themselves to make them easier. The expansion today is remembered for having an extensive process for gaining entry to the raids called Attunement. A large series of story-based quests served as an alternate form of character progression, and players would rarely find themselves with nothing to do. The PvP system had evolved to be more competitive with the new Arena mode, where players create custom teams and battle in small-scale matches to the death, setting the stage for future competitive events in Blizzard's attempt to gain a foothold into the growing esports scene. The Alliance for the first time got to experience a new class to them, the Shaman, and for the Horde, the Paladin, both with 2 new races added to the game, the Draenei and the Blood Elf. 5-man dungeons rose back to the forefront with the advent of the more challenging heroic difficulty. The expansion was packed with features and upgrades in its design, and stands as one of Blizzard's most critically acclaimed releases even to this day. The Lord of the Rings also saw its release in 2007 to serve as competition for World of Warcraft, and although receiving favorable reviews at the time, it couldn't compare to the size and scope of WoW, selling under 200,000 copies in the first months of release, and dwindling shortly thereafter. The game does still run today, supported by a niche community, and is hovering around 40,000 active players at the time of this video. So, the Burning Crusade pressed on, undaunted, and in the following BlizzCon in August, the next expansion, The Wrath of the Lich King, was announced. Players were teased of the land of Northrend, where they had once visited in the events of Warcraft 3. It's here where they would face off against Arthas Menethil as the Lich King. 10 more levels, a new class, the Death Knight, new zones, and siege vehicle combat were just a few of the many new features teased at the convention, and due to the success of the Burning Crusade, there was little question if it would be just as good. 2008 came, and on the one-year anniversary of the release of the Burning Crusade, World of Warcraft hit a landmark 10 million subscribers, absolutely dwarfing any and all competition. The up-and-coming contender, The Age of Conan, saw its release in May of 2008 and received generally positive reviews by the media, and had sold over 1 million copies by the end of its release month, though ultimately, the game had failed to retain this impressive surge of subscribers. Although reviewers worldwide had praised the game, the player base condemned it as being unfinished and rushed, as subscriptions quickly declined, and just 1 year later, Funcom would perform a fatality on 31 out of its 42 servers. Much like The Lord of the Rings Online, the game still holds a dedicated yet niche following, by and large falling short of being the WoW killer that many predicted that it would be. In July, in a bombshell announcement at the height of the game's popularity, the power of the dark side could be resisted no longer, as Blizzard's parent company, Vivendi, announced a merger with Activision. Already having gained a reputation for excessive monetization and driving franchises and developers to an early grave, many were dismayed at the news, fearing that the same would become true for their beloved franchises, including the World of Warcraft. Along with EA, they would gain the reputation of exploiting the player base to the fullest extent, and spearheads today one of the largest focus on cash shops and pay-to-win game design. And just 1 year later, in September of 2009, Activision Blizzard would release the paid faction change service, and 1 month after that, the paid race change service, along with in-game collectible pets. These services were seen by many as an affront on the integrity of the game, and although not terribly impactful by themselves, it was believed that they would serve as a gateway for more damaging paid services to be introduced later. In September of 2008, the release date for the Wrath of the Lich King expansion became set in stone for November of the same year. Just as it was back in 2006, the clock began ticking for players to finish their activities in the Burning Crusade before the content was made to be irrelevant, and due to the difficulty of the raiding scene in general, they had their hands full. There was quite a long drought between the final patch of the Burning Crusade and the launch of Wrath, nearly 8 months, but players didn't seem to mind due to the success and lingering challenge that the expansion had to offer. Those who thought otherwise, though, sought to fill in this void with the release of the highly anticipated Warhammer Online, which saw its release in September. But was it enough to succeed where the Lord of the Rings Online and Age of Conan failed? The game saw similar numbers to the Age of Conan, selling 1.2 million copies at launch and starting off with a solid subscriber base of 800,000 players. But similar to Funcom's debacle, it simply wasn't ready. Performance issues overshadowed what could have been a great experience, and players that have grown accustomed to World of Warcraft's finely tuned and polished combat system immediately noticed a lack of fluidity with its gameplay. Additionally, the game would suffer from major scandals, such as erroneously charging subscribers for years of game time in a single day, with some racking up charges and overdraft fees into the thousands. Similar to the Age of Conan, Warhammer failed to retain this early surge of players, and servers were shut down, and the subscriber base dropped even lower than that of their 2001 MMO, The Dark Age of Camelot. The game officially shut down in 2013, but many deemed it to be truly dead just 1 year after its release. Shortly after, the Wrath of the Lich King expansion saw its release, and Blizzard would once more break sales records. Players charged into Northrend with new zones to explore, dungeons and raids to conquer, and a new class to discover. The Death Knight was what everyone expected and more. A lot more. Way too much, in fact, as many saw them to be far too powerful on release. They would later be tuned down in upcoming patches. Replayability was amplified as the achievement system was implemented, and players could collect points, titles, mounts, and more through this new feature aimed towards completionists. It would receive positive reviews of its many new features and improvements, and the subscriptions continued their upward trend, eventually peaking at 12 million. Just as with the Burning Crusade, it seemed to be unstoppable, though it would be where the first sign of weakness showed. Through the numbers that have been made public, there wasn't a single moment where Wrath had lost subscriptions between reports, but it was also the first expansion where they had stopped gaining subscribers, as they hovered around 11 to 12 million throughout the course of the expansion, and as shown, it wasn't due to any of these would-be WoW killers. In August of the same year, the rating scene expanded in a big way, as the third raid tier for the expansion, the Trial of the Crusader, would release with the heroic difficulty setting. Previously, if players saw an extra challenge with the encounters, they could impose boss-specific hurdles or restrictions upon themselves for bonus loot, achievements, and bragging rights. Players would now instead toggle this optional difficulty setting before entering the raid, and every boss within would deal more damage, take more damage, and gain extra mechanics in exchange for better quality loot. This, along with the Mythic raiding mode to be introduced later, would become a landmark change in the core design of the game, aimed to increase accessibility by greatly lowering the base normal difficulty and funneling those seeking a greater challenge into this optional difficulty setting. This change in design would later be accelerated in the next expansion, the Cataclysm, which would be unveiled in BlizzCon 2009.
That will very literally change the face of the world of Azeroth as you know it. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you a little surprise. Cataclysm!
The world of Azeroth was about to change for good, as the entire old world was deemed to be outdated by 2009 standards. This expansion's villain, Deathwing, would ravage the Eastern Kingdoms in Kalimdor, reshaping them visually and mechanically by reworking each quest. Players would be able to explore all of these changes from the comfort of their flying mounts, which were now enabled in the old world. Two new races, the Worgen for the Alliance and the Goblin for the Horde, would also make their debut, as well as a reworked talent system. The game was to go over its biggest makeover to date, and whether it was for the better or worse was yet to be seen. December marked the month of another hallmark feature being added to the game, the Dungeon Finder. No longer did players have to travel the world to run to their favorite dungeons, as this tool matchmakes them together and teleported the party directly to the entrance. At the time, this feature was received with overwhelmingly positive feedback and a welcome quality of life improvement. Though restricted to players only on their server at the time of its launch, it would later be opened up to other servers, which had the unintended side effect of alienating the community from each other. Previously, having to manually form groups had served as a critical and natural way for players to meet one another and make friends, and they would soon learn the downsides of automating the process. By handling the formation of the group automatically, social interaction was replaced with convenience, and the social aspect critical to MMO gameplay suffered as a result. By itself, this negative impact of the system would remain relatively minor, but in the coming years, players would notice a trend of eliminating these critical social structures in the name of convenience and at the cost of the game's sense of community, which many claim to be one of the biggest features to which it owed its success. The community would also see changes outside of the game. In July of 2010, Blizzard unveiled their new Real ID system, where they're supporting forums for all of their games, not just World of Warcraft, would no longer display character names when posting, but rather real names tied to the account. Players and onlookers alike reacted with concern of Blizzard's disregard of basic privacy rights, deeming that their actions would essentially dox the entire forum community. Doxing is the act of unearthing someone's personal information, such as their name or address, with the ultimate goal of real-life harassment. Today, the advent of swatting shows the repercussions of those whose personal information was leaked. For a company to do the work for them was seen as extremely dangerous. Flame wars and online disputes, past, present, and future, would serve as vessels for real-life harassment, they argued. They stated that the reason for the change
have a part to play.
I promise you, when your life's on the line, the power will be there.
The Wheel of Time, only on Prime Video.
Usually topping on a pizza chat. Is there any ren in the lure? Wait a second. Am I going to Ashtown? The thing though with that, you know what I'm gonna do off stream? I'm gonna fish. I'm gonna fish off stream. I need to get 300. Anyone miss the good Ashra like stuff? I kinda miss it too. Even though you guys didn't have instead of I wouldn't mind to get buffed though actually. What about the diet? Oh shit, he's right. Yeah, fuck that guys. Yeah, I forgot bro. Shame on the guy that says the diet. Guys, he's right. What I'm gonna make instead is I'm gonna make, yeah, I cannot guys. I wanna do a 1 month diet. Yeah, but what about I start my months the new year, the 1 for all the January? Would that make sense? Can I get less thick in the face if for 1 month I eat well, I go jogging, and I do set-up, push-up every day? Almost every day. I think so, yeah. There is no way. I need a mage. Oh, this guy is the staff, man. What is this staff, actually? Wait, did he enchant the... That is the staff of Skolo, isn't it? Wow, and he put... Is he crazy in his mind? But it's not even good. Wait. Hey, correct me if this guy is a legend, but yo, correct me if I'm wrong. Give 20 additional intellect to the party member with 30. Does that stack with Arcane Intellect? I think it does, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. So it's not bad though. So you can't pop it then switch your staff. But that's huge then. No, it does. That's crazy. Okay, now I need to find a priest. Is there any priest is willing to like just buff me for an hour? Or in a druid that will like that? Anyone? Look at that. There's this guy already like, you know, doing this thing. Is there any priest? That's a mage. That's a warlock. Is there a mage? A druid. Alright, now I spam this, I do this, and then... Ah, it's gonna stop soon. Ah. How much you will tips for I think 50 50 silver for a buff. Is it good? No, thank you bro. I think it's fine. He buffed himself too. I don't know how much usually you guys tips for it. Whoa! Who did that? Can I get the one stamina plus 3? Yeah, I think 50 silver. Now he's not only using mana, bro, he's using a reagent. So I guess maybe 50 silver is actually cheap, isn't it? 1 hour buff. You need a reagent for that. How much is the reagent? Can I get a soul stone? Wait, did it pop? Oh my god, bro, it's fine. Like, bro, it's... I don't get... Like, what's wrong with these people, man? 1 gold just like teleport. Yo, your name is Feo Campit in Fresh, bro. I already banned you. Why don't... I'm gonna ban you again. Change your name, bro. Holy fuck. How can you make a level... Yo, make a level 60, bro, and duel me. We'll see who's getting camped. Alright, buddy? Nice, gonna make it. Oh my god, bro, this is... Alright, whatever, I'm leaving. Alright, winter, springtime. We're gonna farm some Arcane Crystal. It's been a while. I just want a fucking fort, bro. Yo, by the way, I am looking for shaman in my guild. I think I'm out. I don't need priests anymore. So what we're gonna do? Guild looking. I'm going to look for a shaman. For a shaman. So I say our like statue on currently on
was to cut down on forum trolling. Their logic being that if someone's real name was tied to their post, they'd think more carefully about how they treat others, and that, quote, removing the veil of anonymity, typical to online dialogue, will contribute to a more positive forum environment and connect the Blizzard community in ways that they haven't been connected before. Another community manager put it to the test, and in an effort to quell the players' fear, he posted his real-life name. Within one day, players found and published his address, phone number, age, and took to placing false pizza orders in his name, and even placed death threats, connecting him with the community in ways that he's never been connected before. Shortly after, the co-founder of Blizzard, Mike Morhaime, stepped in and announced that they had rescinded their plans of publishing the players' real names. In October, Blizzard pinned down a release date for the Cataclysm expansion, December 7th of the same year, and despite the controversy, the game in October would reach its peak subscriber count of 12 million. The holidays came, and the Day of Reckoning was at hand, and the World of Warcraft would suffer Cataclysm in more ways than one. In addition to the retuned Old World, the talent system would also see an overhaul, altering the traditional freeform 3-tree talent system into specializations. Players would be forced to pick just one, and lose access to many spells iconic to the other two. The trees as a whole would also be simplified, and the amount of points to invest reduced. Class and item balance in general would also be at the forefront of changes in the expansion, mostly through the form of removal. Spell ranks were removed, and all abilities now just had one rank that scaled with your level, and were trained automatically, and much more. The Cataclysm expansion is seen by many to mark the point when the RPG and MMORPG was made to be lowercase, as it transformed into a much simpler version of an already straightforward game. As World of Warcraft strayed further and further away from its social and RPG roots, a community of private server players would grow larger and larger with each expansion. Independent groups took to hosting past versions of the game, the most prolific of which being of its original state, referred to as vanilla. Though its beginnings were humble, this private server community would eventually grow large enough to become a problem for Blizzard, and they would find themselves embroiled in legal battles to protect their IP from infringement, and would eventually influence a major developed project many years later. Regardless, they showed once more that they had no difficulty in selling expansions, as once again, they broke their own sales record with Cataclysm, selling a staggering 3.3 million copies on release day. But unlike the previous expansions, they had not seen an overall increase in subscribers post-release, instead remaining steady at the 12 million mark it had been stuck at since the beginning of 2009. And for the first time since its inception in 2004, the World of Warcraft would see a loss in reported subscribers. In fact, Cataclysm would fail to gain subscribers in a single reported quarter in its near 2-year run, discounting the release of the next expansion, The Mists of Pandaria, which would be announced in October. The initial reaction would be very mixed. The theme of the expansion was so unexpected that many thought it to be an out-of-season April Fool's joke. Players would explore the mysterious world of Pandaria with a new race, the Pandaren, and a new class, the Monk. Dungeons were getting a special challenge mode to bring relevancy once more to 5-man content, and scenarios would be queuable micro-dungeons designed for 3 players, and the pet battle system was also implemented, a minigame reminiscent of the popular Pokemon franchise. As for the talent system, it would be simplified even further into the tier system, offering more impactful choices, but at a reduced quantity of just 6 points to invest. And, most controversially, cross-realm zones would eventually be implemented, where players of differing realms would be able to see and interact with one another. Due to the falling subscriber base brought on by the Cataclysm, there were far too many servers running for the dwindling player base, and as a result, the worlds were starting to become barren. By grouping servers together, Blizzard aimed once more to breathe life into the world of Azeroth. While many looked at the expansion as something new and fresh, many more would be immediately turned off by its aesthetics, and due to the downward trend in subscriptions, skepticism if it would be a success was at an all-time high. This was still far into the future though, and the current focus remained to be Cataclysm, which at this point was still steadily losing subscribers. In November, along with the final raid, Dragon Soul, the LFR system would see its release. Similar to the Dungeon Finder released in the Wrath of the Lich King expansion, this would allow players to matchmake with others in a queue-based raiding mode, doubling down on their design of trading away critical social and RPG functions for the sake of convenience and accessibility. To accommodate for the increased disorganization that came with queue-based matchmaking, the difficulty would be lowered even further than that of the base normal difficulty. It was from this point forward that players no longer needed to even join a guild to experience the endgame content. They didn't need to read strategies, and they didn't even need to speak a single word in fact, as Blizzard deemed it an issue that 100% of the player base were not completing these raids in their entirety. The accomplishment of clearing a raid would be more accessible than ever before, but as a result, the accomplishment would mean nothing from this point forward. During this time, another would-be WoW killer was beginning to generate interest. Star Wars Galaxies at this point had been shut down in order to bolster the subscriber base of Star Wars: The Old Republic. Developed by BioWare and published by... It would be attempt number 2 for Star Wars on the massively multiplayer scale. This installment promised a unique and fully voice-acted campaign for each of their classes, a space shooter component with a customizable ship, a thriving endgame for PvE and PvP, and perhaps most importantly, it was during the first time where the reigning champion showed weakness. While ultimately the previous contenders failed on their own merits, it can be argued that the tremendous success of the World of Warcraft during their debut certainly made them look worse in comparison. Now that this weakness was showing though, the timing was ideal. Would the Old Republic succeed where its predecessors failed? Ex-subscribers, disillusioned with the direction that the game had taken throughout the Cataclysm, looked at the Old Republic as the true successor this time. Players had been doomsaying the imminent demise of World of Warcraft ever since its launch in 2004, only this time, the game's downward trend would support their claims. So, the moment of truth came, the launch arrived, and like many other MMOs before it, the Old Republic launched too early. In an attempt to release it during the holiday season, it was rushed out, and would suffer from technical issues, game-breaking bugs, and questionable design decisions, most notable of which is their use of the hero engine, which proved to be poor in an MMO environment. There would be a short delay between a player casting a spell and that spell actually landing. An issue they attempted to rectify by tying an animation for each ability to make it seem more natural. As a result though, the combat felt very sluggish and awkward, and those used to the crisp and smooth nature of the World of Warcraft's combat system noticed a huge and immediate downgrade in quality. This, combined with other disappointing features, such as their spaceship component being entirely on rails, hindered its success in its crucial launch period. The game had sold over 2 million copies and held 1.7 million subscribers, which was around a sixth of the World of Warcraft subscriptions at the time. the closest that any recent MMO came to rivaling WoW's popularity since its launch in 2004. But much like the Lord of the Rings Online, the Age of Conan, and Warhammer Online, the Star Wars The Old Republic suffered a similar fate, and the subscriptions quickly plummeted. Not even 8 months later, it would convert to the free-to-play model, often seen as the death sentence of MMOs. Today, the game holds a total of 5 servers, once again coming nowhere near being the WoW killer it was predicted to be.
You were the chosen one! It was said that you would destroy them,
World of Warcraft.
not join them!
Time marched on, and the Mists of Pandaria expansion would release in the month of September, and for the first time since the release of the Wrath of the Lich King expansion, they saw an increase in subscriptions, though the eagerness of the player base was notably diminished, as this would be the first expansion to fail in breaking sales records for Blizzard upon release, falling 30% below than that of Cataclysm. Barring this initial surge, they would be unable to halt the downward trend that had begun since the launch of Cataclysm, as subscribers would quickly drop from 10 million at launch to 9 million, then age, around 6.8 at its lowest point, a drop of over 30%, and the players were starting to feel the effect of a world that grew less active with each passing day. Crossrealm officially saw its release, which would make the world seem sprawling once more, but once again at the expense of the server's community, which would be present only in name from this point forward. Seeing the same players and guilds on your server consistently turned out to be an integral part of establishing a community that was only realized once it was taken away. The world once more had players in it, but due to the large amount of servers that would be grouped together, players scarcely saw or recognized other players from previous adventures. The basis to form a community, which had been a key reason for its success, was now a distant memory. The world was in a predicament, and Blizzard had a difficult problem to solve. A nearly empty world with little community, or a full world, ironically enough, with no community. Though innocent enough on launch, Crossrealm is seen today as a necessary evil for a problem, which true solution lies in recapturing subscribers now lost. An issue that Blizzard would struggle with for years to come, as the once iconic MMORPG now barely resembled an MMO due to its destroyed social structures, and barely an RPG due to its abandoned RPG elements, which would be taken a step further in March of 2013 as the game saw another major change with its first instance of forged loot. Released with the Throne of Thunder raid, loot had the potential to have an increased quality, regardless of the difficulty at which the players defeated the bosses. Having previously lost longevity in the raiding scene through the reduced base difficulty, they had hoped to regain it via randomized loot, and although it was relatively tame at the time of its release, this foraging system would later be seen by many to get out of hand, and help diminish and confuse the reward structure that had been standard for the game for 8 years at that point. Time passed, patches released, new raids and systems debuted, and much changed with the expansion in the year of 2013. Something that didn't though was this ongoing downward trend of subscribers. In BlizzCon 2013, Blizzard would announce its next expansion, the Warlords of Draenor. The player base would journey back to the world of Draenor, an alternate reality before it was corrupted into what they knew as the Outland in the Burning Crusade expansion. It's here where they would establish forward bases, known as garrisons, and launch a campaign against Garrosh Hellscream, the leader of the United Orc Army known as the Iron Horde, who were set to invade the land of Azeroth. At this point, the private server community had gained considerable traction as players yearned for the game that had originally captivated them, and were becoming more and more unruly as the retail version strayed further and further away from its roots, and they began campaigning Blizzard to officially develop and support this past version of the game. In a Q&A panel during the convention, one such player asked for an official answer on the possibility of a legacy server. The question was fielded by J. Allen Brack, at the time a production director for World of Warcraft, and he delivered this now infamous answer.
Have you ever thought about adding servers for previous expansions as they were then?
No. And by the way, you don't want to do that either. You think you do, but you don't. Remember when you had to like spam cities and say need a tank, need a tank, need a tank during the Burning Crusade days? You don't remember that because now you just push a button that says go to the dungeon. You don't want to do that.
Though the quote would draw immediate ire of the legacy community, it would prove to be an integral moment in its development, serving as a rallying cry of sorts, and bringing more and more attention on the possibilities of developing such a version of the game. The answer was seen as dismissive and out of touch, especially considering the fact that private servers at this point had grown to new levels of popularity. And with this dismissive answer, the questions started turning into demands and discussion of its viability or not, and served to fan the flames of a community becoming increasingly disillusioned of the World of Warcraft and Blizzard in their current state. As the players were leaving, Blizzard had sought to recover financially through an increased focus and impact of their cash shop, and against all assurances previously made shortly after their merger with Activision, they would finally turn the corner in December of 2013 and officially implemented the cash shop in-game, and along with it came the most impactful service to date, the level boost. Leveling was now skippable, as players could pay $60 to immediately be fast-tracked to the maximum level and jump right into the endgame. By and large, the most impactful paid service at that point. What was at one point seen as a cornerstone of MMO design was now skippable through an officially endorsed service. The consequence and investment of picking a class, investing time into it, leveling it, and learning it were thrown away, sacrificed like many other features for convenience, accessibility, and short-term financial gain, further damaging its already crippled RPG design. The backlash was immediate, but little did players know, it was just the beginning, and the standards of paid advantage in the game would sink lower and lower in the coming years. Time passed, and two things remained constant: a decrease in subscriber count and stagnation. The final major patch of the expansion had released in September of the previous year, 2013, and other than the addition of the level boost, the game saw no updates until the Warlords of Draenor pre-patch in October of 2014, an astounding gap of 13 months in the game's development. This had marked the longest drought yet, and subscribers fled the game in record numbers, as the Mists of Pandaria failed to retain the migrating player base. November came, and with it, the launch of the Warlords of Draenor expansion. Despite the game's troubles, a combination of marketing and hype led to a rather successful expansion launch sales-wise. Over 3.3 million players had expansions in hand, ready to step through the Dark Portal for a second time, and subscriptions skyrocketed to 10.5 million, the highest it had been since the launch of the Mists of Pandaria, and it holds the record of the largest surge in subscribers for expansion launches. Though unfortunately for Blizzard, history would repeat itself in more ways than one, as once again they had failed to retain this boon as problems soon arose after launch.
Oh, that's nice. Every fucking server that I even play on is off. Oh, yeah. It looks like mine aren't the only ones.
They had come under a DDoS attack, as their servers were flooded with artificial traffic until they shut down from the strain. This would go on for several days as law enforcement investigated into the matter. Meanwhile, though, players would become increasingly frustrated as the game remained to be mostly unplayable. The culprits were eventually stopped, but the damage had been done, and the game experienced its worst launch since its initial release in 2004. What's more, once the issue subsided, players were met with what is now widely considered to be one of the worst expansions in the game's history. The main feature of the expansion, the garrison system, isolated players in their own instance, where they could recruit followers, start an herb garden, mine and craft, and even use the auction house with the correct buildings. Although convenient, it served as yet another feature to alienate an already fractured community from each other, and the game at times seemed as if it was single-player, a problem made worse by the massive hemorrhage of subscribers that was yet to come. Just as how the expansion broke subscription records on launch, it also broke records for lost subscriptions shortly after, as players saw little enjoyment from what was eventually ousted as an unfinished expansion, as many of the features previously teased would be left on the cutting room floor, including new systems, 2 major cities, battlegrounds, another zone, and even an entire raid tier, to name just a few. Time between patches would grow even larger, and the patches themselves delivered less content. The expansion held a total of just 3 major raids throughout its entirety, with every expansion preceding having at least 4. The combined effect of instanced garrisons and players flocking away made the new world seem dead, and so more and more servers would be connected to each other in an attempt to bring life back into the dying world, as subscriptions plummeted to an all-time low since its initial rise in vanilla at 5.5 million. It was announced shortly after that they would no longer report subscription numbers, stating that there are better indicators of business performance. The message was clear. Where they had lost revenue in subscriptions, they gained several times over via the paid level boost. Success was no longer tied to a healthy player base, but rather revenue, and although looked at today as an embarrassing period in the game's history, financially it lifted the developer to new heights. Combined with other cash shop services, the level boost and the Warlords of Draenor played a large role in Activision Blizzard's best financial quarter to date. The influence of the cash shop now fully realized, it would be taken a step further in March of 2015 with the addition of the WoW token, where players could exchange real money for in-game gold, or on the other hand, use gold to purchase a token to pay for the subscription fee, or convert it into a balance only spendable on Blizzard products. Regardless of the method, it would prove to be a massive commercial success for Activision Blizzard, earning them record profits during record low subscriptions. A long time had passed since the cash shop's initial rise in 2008. Those who warned of the dangerous path that World of Warcraft was set on saw their predictions unfold slowly over the course of several years. At this point in the game's history, it was possible to buy levels, it was possible to buy currency, and with this currency, you could buy items and even services from other players, such as raid or arena carries, and the list of things that you couldn't buy was now far shorter than the list of things that you could buy. It was at this point that the game was deemed by many to be pay to win, as real-life purchases now had a clear and heavy impact on the power levels between different players. Behavior that previously warranted suspensions